Welcome to the Family Front. My name is Hannah Bruck, and I work at the Texas Public Policy Foundation to make Texas the best place to build families and marriages. Today we're talking about one of the most urgent questions facing parents. How do we protect our children in a world where vulnerability isn't physical, but digital, and often invisible? Joining me to answer this question today is Andrea Sparks, Director of Government and Strategic Relations for Buckner International, a 147-year-old faith-based nonprofit serving children, families, and seniors in Texas, Africa, and Latin America. She's also the co-founder of Not on Our Watch Texas, which engages women in business to protect children from online harm and exploitation. Andrea previously served as the founding director on the Texas Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team, leading efforts in survivor advocacy, prevention, and policy. She has also held several leadership roles at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Texas and Texas CASA. A lawyer by training, Andrea has represented children and families in child protection, juvenile justice, and adoption cases. Andrea has been married for 30 years to Grant Sparks, Assistant United States Attorney for the Western District of Texas. They are the proud parents of 2 grown children and a rescue dog. Andrea, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you do. I think a lot of this conversation that parents have to face comes with a lot of fear attached. And so I kind of just want to kick off by talking about your experience working in kind of combating those vulnerabilities in sex trafficking, and to get your opinion on maybe how the landscape has changed or how vulnerabilities have shifted in the digital age.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question and a big one. I mean, children are vulnerable because they're children. All children are vulnerable. Their brains are not quite developed. They don't see red flags that we may see. They don't trust their instinct that, like we do as we grow. We learn to trust, our feelings. And if you think about it, even when they're little bitty, especially when they're little bitty, they don't even see themselves as separate from their parents. So they're just creating their identity. So there's a lot to be concerned about when raising children, but also I feel like sometimes we tend to ring the bell too loud. And, I raise children. You could raise children. We all make mistakes, but children are resilient. And with just the right intentions and a little bit of education, we can all do a good job at raising our children, even in this day and age when all of the scary things are not just outside. They're actually, sometimes on the smart devices that they take in their rooms.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of want to zoom into that landscape as we think about these social media platforms that allow for kind of a lot less responsibility and transparency and a lot more anonymity. How do you think that has particularly changed kind of the threats that children face for potential for maybe misinformation that leads to destructive behaviors?
Oh, tremendously. And this is still evolving. Right now there's a lawsuit happening in LA, where parents are suing Meta and Snapchat and TikTok and because their kids have been harmed and sometimes have taken their own lives due to these kinds of pressures online. I think, it has changed everything. When I grew up, I'm going to age myself, my mom would say, stay away from the white van when you go to the playground, don't take candy from a stranger. And now the new white van is a smartphone or a tablet. Sometimes kids get these tablets from school to do their schoolwork on. And we're literally allowing them to take them into their bedrooms where they can meet anyone. And let's face it, where are predators going to go? Predators who want to get to children are going to go where the children are. And they are more and more online. And they are in games, and they are in social media apps, and they are in messaging apps. So it doesn't matter the game. You would say, okay, why would a predator be, surely this game is safe. It's for little girls who want to, have like pretend ponies as pets. That's exactly where they're going to go. So it has changed everything, and it's harder. It's harder to know what our kids are doing, to know that they're safer even when they're home. But it's hopeful too. And I think that Parents can do it. We are doing a good job, for the most part. There's a lot of work going on to educate and empower parents.
Yeah. And I guess building that out, I think probably for parents, I am not a parent yet, but I'm certainly thinking about what it is going to be like, what it is like now. So in your experience as someone who was a parent kind of in this transitionary period and now is working with so many parents that are experiencing kind of these educational curves of having to parent in the digital age, what do you think are maybe some misconceptions or education points that you notice are frequently most useful for parents thinking about mitigating risk?
Yeah. Couple of things. I think we can overcomplicate parenting sometimes, and make it scary for young people. And we're seeing birth rates drop, which is not good. I talked to my own daughter who was recently married, and I'm like, okay, when am I going to be a grandma? And she's like, oh, we're still thinking about that. I'm like, what? No, come on, let's go. I think there's a tendency to think, and it's because of all the information out there about parenting, all the parenting advice, that you have to read all these books and you have to know all this stuff in order to be a good parent. And we know that's not the case, right? The basics are, even with technology, open communication with your child. We also think sometimes we have to have all the bells and whistles, whether it's a filtering app on their phones and, parental controls and all of that stuff. And yes, you probably should, but also that's not fail-safe. And I get calls on a weekly basis from parents who thought they did all the right things by, buying all the technology that protects their kids from technology. And yet someone has found a way through, or their kids have, found a different, smartphone, or somehow that has not worked. And so it's difficult, but I think the most important thing is go back to the basics and have open communication with your child and let them know that they can come to you and talk to you and not be afraid. What I tell parents all the time, if they hear nothing else when we do these presentations on internet safety and all these things, is be a trusted adult for your kids. Be someone that they can trust to tell when they are sad, scared, or confused, whether it's online or in the real world, and let them know that they're not going to get in trouble for telling you. And then try to keep that promise. Sometimes you're like, you did what? You shared what? But, just try to keep your cool and then help them navigate through this world, this online world, because it's a scary world. It's something that even us parents don't always understand. Our kids understand it better than us. And predators are very manipulative. So even if your child is doing all the right things and you're doing all the right things, it's likely that a predator is going to reach out to them at some point. And so they need to be able to come to you and say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, this just happened. I'm afraid. What can I do? Can you help me? And you help them.
Yeah. And I think I love the picture that you painted with the white van, because I think that it was very easy and I remember my mom saying the same thing, or even having jokes about like, don't accept candy from, men in white vans. But in kind of this context, and at TPF, we think about the family as a first line of protection, which I think is true here. So as parents kind of sift through information that they receive about the interactions their children are having online, what are some qualities of kind of like flags that they can keep in mind of potentially predatory behavior?
Yeah. Oh, man. And these vary by child, right? If your child is spending more and more time online, gaming or messaging or whatever they're doing online, they might not even show you what they're doing online. If they're spending more and more time online, that is a red flag. Not only because there could be a predator on the other side of that, but also because it's a real addiction. Social media and the algorithms that they use intentionally to get our attention, not only, can addict children, they addict us, right? I mean, those smartphones are a real thing. So that is a red flag, because what happens then is we know that exposure to social media sites and certain things that are posted on social media sites can drive depression, anxiety, especially in young people, right? And that whole compare and despair scenario. But also, if they are trying to hide what they're doing, if they are withdrawn or their behavior changes, where they're spending less time with friends in the real world and more time with online friends, if they receive any gifts that you don't, where did they receive this gift? If they have another device that you don't know about, that is a huge red flag. Many times, predators, traffickers will send kids devices that they can use just to contact them. All of those things, I would say, just this morning at my workout group, a mom came up to me and said, wow, we were at school today and the counselor was telling me that we have more and more kids who are falling in love with AI companions. And they're spending less time with their friends and more time with these AI companions. That's a red flag. You want your kids to grow up to be socially healthy, to have interpersonal skills, to be able to look people in the eye and have conversations. All of those things, just the overuse of smart devices can be detrimental in and of itself.
For parents thinking about having these conversations with their kids, what do you think is maybe a healthy pathway to kind of balancing the quantity of kind of independence that they give a child while also being kind of protective and wanting to maintain that communication and also some level of restriction for online platforms? How would you kind of encourage parents to start those conversations?
Yeah, this is where I see a lot of hope. I'm talking to more and more young parents who are saying right away, oh, when my child is of age, we're going to have a talk. We're going to have, we're not getting that phone until later. We are going to potentially, consider some other kinds of technologies. And they're very, these young parents have grown up with social media themselves. And they see the problems, in their generation. And so they are looking to carve a different path for their kids, which is great. I heard of a bunch of young moms in my neighborhood at Christmas got their kids old-fashioned phones for Christmas so they can actually talk on the phone with their friends instead of, FaceTiming or Snapchatting or TikToking. And that's wonderful. That's great. And it also, the kids were excited about it. It's a new thing. People are waiting till later for their kids to get the smartphones. They're having conversations with their kids earlier. I always recommend that a phone, when a child gets a device from a parent, that there's an expectation like this is an agreement we have. This comes with strings attached. There are some ground rules. This should never be in your room at night. It should be charging in a place where the family is, or like the family room, or even mom and dad's bedroom. You should never take the smartphone in the bathroom with you. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of predators encourage kids to do that because that's the one place mom or dad's not going to go. They're going to leave you alone, right? You should time limit. I think you should be very open with your kids about the addiction to social media and how social media can make you more anxious and depressed and why it does that. It was super interesting. My kiddos were kind of grew up toward the beginning of this, right, when this was all coming out. And my daughter read a book her first year of college, and she just got mad because the book was about how social media and online advertisers are manipulating our kids, right? They're monetizing our kids. And she's like, wait, they're using me? That's it. I'm off of this. It's like she actually got off of it for a few years. I think equipping kids with that kind of information can be very empowering, and they can kind of see that you're on their side. You're not doing this to be strict or, for the heck of it, or just to be a mean parent. You're doing this because you're trying to protect them and make sure they have the best childhood possible.
I saw recently And it's funny because we're kind of on the latter stages of like the iPad kid generation, which was that whole group of children that were kind of in the genesis before the research was really released on how it's affecting their minds, and they're glued to an iPad. And it was funny because I was watching an interview with, I guess, some graduates of that generation, and they were talking about like the revolutionary concept of not using a device, lowering screen time. And they're like, it's actually huge, and my mind feels sharper and it feels better. And so I think we are at an exciting time where people are a little bit more critical of what's in front of them. And that's immensely encouraging to hear, just even you talk about in your work.
I mean, just look at the phone-free schools law that went into effect in Texas just in the past year. We're hearing anecdotally so far that kids are reading, that there's less fights because why would I get in a fight if I can't tape it and put it on social media? Like it's so strange that we didn't think that was going to be an outcome, but lots of unintended positive consequences like that. I had a young man tell me, he was in football, and this was right when the ban went into place. I was doing a presentation for some high school boys, and he said, I really like not having my phone at school because I'm actually looking up when I walk in the hall. I'm seeing kids and talking to kids that I didn't even know existed in my school. And I'm meeting people, and we sit and talk at lunch. And I just think that's incredible. So I do have a lot of hope on this issue.
Yeah. And it's good to see kind of communities being rebuilt in that way, because it's so easy. And it's not always bad to create online connections, but it's so easy to forget that there is a world around you.
Absolutely.
I want to kind of pivot to maybe talk about your experience on the governor's team and really just how that experience shaped your view of kind of the role of state institutions. So I'd love to hear your perspective from that time, maybe what led you into that field, and then just what that was like.
Yeah. So I had worked in child protection for years and years and years as an attorney, working for court-appointed special advocates, and then went to work at NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And my husband had prosecuted these cases for years, but never really brought that work home. Child exploitation, child sex trafficking. We were raising 2 little kids. It was very, very tough emotionally, as you can imagine. So I go to work for the National Center, and all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. These kids who are missing, who are being exploited, are some of the same kids that I was representing in the foster care system, right? The vulnerabilities are what leads them to that victimization. And so that was a big, eye-opener that we've got to go upstream. All of the movies like Taken and things like that talk about, a stranger comes in, kidnaps your child from this wonderful family, and then they're trafficked, maybe overseas. That is not the case in the vast majority of these cases, right? And usually it's a child who feels like they don't belong. They're lacking a family relationship, one or more parents. They've got trauma that makes them, kind of stuck in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And then that leads to them being vulnerable to these traffickers. And so that was a big eye-opener. And then going to the governor's office, when the governor says, I want to appoint you to this post, you take it most of the time. And I did with a little trepidation, just because the job was, okay, go figure out how to serve child sex trafficking victims. And we did that, and we have, I think, a great model in Texas that other states are now replicating, but we also wanted to get ahead of it. And what we focused on was not just raising awareness, because raising awareness of the red flags of trafficking means you're seeing it as it's happening, right? We wanted to get before that. We wanted to get upstream. How can we prevent these kids from falling into that trap? And so we did things like partnered with CASA, partnered with groups that help vulnerable children. We got with TJJD and all the juvenile probation offices and made sure that their kids were screened for those kinds of risks, and they were getting the education they needed to spot this kind of manipulative behavior before they ended up with a trafficker. Boys and girls clubs, something we funded. And so I think all of those things were super important. And frankly, coming to Buckner now, 4 years ago, to go even more upstream is what my intention was. It's so interesting how life works. Like, you keep learning about, things, but family formation is huge. And the family is such an incredible protective factor for kids. So we serve families in Africa, Latin America, and in Texas, or we say Texas and 7 other countries. But in all those families we serve, you can see some of the vulnerabilities that could lead to this trafficking or exploitation, but we're also targeting those vulnerabilities. So helping people put food on the table, so they don't have to exploit themselves or their children. Helping families stay together as a unit more, strongly, healthy, express emotions, have those family rituals so kids feel like they belong. When there is abuse and neglect, helping families figure out how to fix that, so that they can keep their family strong and not have to go into the foster care system. When a child has to go into the foster care system, making sure that, have we checked out all kinship placements first? Have we found a good family for them? Are they going to get adopted? So finding permanency. So that family is the protective factor, and strengthening those families so that they're economically strong and relationally strong, and mental health strong, and all of those things really can do a lot to go upstream and prevent trafficking and exploitation.
Thank you so much for your work and those thoughts. I want to come back to kind of this question of institutions, but first I want to drill down into kind of an undertone of what you just said about kind of personal identity in a family unit for a child, and then also that social confidence, which maybe starts in social interactions in the family and then builds outward. What are particular qualities that you see in kind of the healthy family institutions, or the ways in which a child maintains a personal identity, and how does that relate to them kind of being insulated from a predatory behavior?
Yeah. It's a balance, right? Because they need to feel like they belong, and they know they have an identity. That is so, so important. And also, they need to know how to say no. They need to be given permission to say no. So one of the things we taught at NCMEC, we had a class called Kids Smarts. I believe it still exists. And it was based on all the research that's been done on attempted abductions, on actual attempted abductions, and all kinds of crimes against children. And NCMEC is the repository for that, So based on everything they know, they came up with these kind of protective messages for parents and kids who are younger. And one of them is, say no. If someone is touching you inappropriately, even if it's your grandfather, say no. And you know what, Grandpa? Let them say no, right? I remember all the time. Now, this would not maybe work in my Cajun family, because I remember all the time, go give Aunt so-and-so a kiss and go give Uncle so-and-so's a kiss, and that was just, but if I had a feeling like no, I think my grandma would have said, okay, that's okay, And so we have to teach kids to trust their instincts, and to be able to say no. Like, this is my body, and you don't get to touch it like you want to just because I'm a kid. That's a big, hard lesson for us to teach our kids, because they're so cuddly and they want to hug, and we want them to hug, and we don't want them to be shy. We want them to be polite, but I think that's a big one. And NCMEC certainly teaches that. Another one is always have a friend, always have a friend with you. So if you're going to go outside and play, bring a friend, don't go by yourself. If you're going to walk down the street, make sure you have someone with you. And then the third is tell your parent, tell your trusted adult, So I think there are certain things you can instill even in little ones that help them have that sense of not power, but like, okay, I can sort of, I know how to navigate the world, right? I can see red flags, or I can trust my instinct. I can say no if I don't want that hug. That empowers them later in life and builds that resilience and self-regulation, so that they can stay protected. And fathers particularly have a role in this. So both mothers and fathers bring protective factors, right? And together even more, because they compound each other. But fathers tend to have more physical play with their kids and teaches them boundary settings in a way like, okay, that's rough and tumble, but oh, that hurt. And oh, that's a little too far. You hurt daddy. You know, like there's something about that physical play and boundary setting and self-regulation that really can go a long way later on with behavioral health, mental health, and just self-confidence.
Wow. Thank you. Jumping, I guess, back to the institution of family and kind of the way in which a father and a mother instill confidence in their child, and then that child enters the institution of kind of society and surrounding communities. What do you see as kind of a limiting factor in the government in the way in which, or the state in which it interacts with families, and where do you see kind of the broader community filling that void, or kind of where do you see the two roles?
You know, that's a great question. It's about to be Child Abuse Awareness Month, Child Abuse Prevention Month, and I don't like that term, Child Abuse Prevention Month. I don't. I think we need to think of a new way of focusing on the positive. Like, how do we help families? And not just the state, churches, schools, communities, neighbors. I think, you know, that there are lots of things we can do to help families, especially now. You know, we have some families struggling economically. We have some families struggling with mental illness. We have some kids with behavioral health issues, parents with substance abuse issues. And yet, we're not saying that all of those kids need to be in a child abuse program, right? Or need to be contacted by Child Protective Services. And we used to say all the time, report, report, report. If you see something, report it to CPS. Well, that sometimes can result in over-reporting. And then parents don't feel like they can trust their neighbors or the teacher or the nurse that's reported. So the state, and I say the state, a lot of us stakeholders in the state, a lot of advocates have been looking at a more supporting than reporting role for communities. And we've got to do that because I'm going to say this, but it does take a village. It does. I mean, it's not, parents can't just do this on their own. It's neighbors, you know, like the more trusted adults you have around you as a child, whether that's neighbors, uncles, aunts, grandparents, teachers, the better you're going to be, the more secure you're going to be, the more insulated you're going to be from, you know, the kinds of abuse we're talking about. And we've got to figure out a way to do that again, to bring that back.
Building that concept out into kind of the digital space, I also want to jump back to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier in the context of how kids are interacting with social media online. And I want to talk kind of about AI chatbots and that new presenting threat that exists that's not as easy to report or even to manage. So from your perspective, what do you think is the path forward on these issues? How can parents be thinking about managing this? And then also, where do you see the state playing in that arena?
Well, this is where I think advocacy becomes really important. Because for all I just said, and how people should parent and not be afraid to parent, and there is hope, there is still a need to regulate tech. I mean, there just is. I'm not against tech. I use chatbots myself for various, you know, questions I have or whatever. Social media can be great. It can be a great way to connect with family and friends. And there's so much good. There's so much good in tech. But we have to have guardrails to protect the most vulnerable. And right now, the most vulnerable are children, people who are struggling with mental illness or substance abuse, and our older people who really don't understand tech. I just had a very difficult conversation with my mom this morning around tech. So I think this is where advocacy comes in, and definitely the state of Texas has shown that it's willing to do its part in protecting children with the App Store Accountability Act, passing last session. I know it was struck down recently by a federal judge here in Austin, but other states are passing that act. In fact, it's up for a hearing federally this week, so we'll see what happens there. And then the case here is going to the Fifth Circuit. There's Kids Online Safety Act in D.C. We have lots of things in the works here in Texas, so Not on Our Watch is working on some of these issues around AI companions for kids. Chatbots are fine, but when kids start choosing their AI companions over friends and over family, and when those AI companions show the tendency to manipulate the relationship, there were a couple of toys that came off the market right before Christmas because of people's concerns that these teddy bears that had AI in them were manipulating little kids. So we've got to be really careful, and parents can only do so much. We are trying to figure it out. It's a complicated world. We can barely keep up, and now we've got AI companions luring kids and convincing them to do all kinds of things. So at some point, we do have to have sensible regulation, especially to protect our kids.
I appreciated also the way that you've been framing it throughout this conversation as an addictive product. These chatbots especially kind of being designed to say relatively provocative things or to kind of always add a level of insulation between themselves and the child, or itself and the child, to keep that attention going. And thank you for highlighting. It's huge. We were excited too about the victories that Texas has had in the last sessions. What do you see as kind of the path forward, or what are you guys thinking about in your work, or even based on other states that you would like to see a continuation of those victories be?
We've got to get Kids Online Safety Act passed federally. That is going to be the most important thing, I think, because it says that tech companies have a duty of care to design their products in a way that don't harm children. And that's just so important. There are other, laws that we can layer on top of that, but that to me is the gold standard. And then I think we should address AI companions in the next session. It's last session, we didn't even know this was happening, and now here we are. Like, there's just new things all the time, so we're having to play catch up, like we did last session with deep fakes, and with AI generated and nudify apps. There's also a real need to address education in schools. We've got to have good online safety education in schools, and right now it's just a smattering is what I'm seeing. Maybe some digital citizenship education, in large part thanks to David's Law, David's legacy. But we've got to update that to address some of these newer dangers that are coming out. And I know that there's a push also to look at ed tech in schools, because now that the smartphones are out of the schools, kids are using their school-issued computers and iPads to get at some of the same content, and it's distracting. And we just want to make sure that tech is used for good in schools. It's used intentionally to teach kids things that they can use, they can learn on tech, and not just as, a distraction. So
we've talked about, so obviously some pretty heavy concepts, some pretty dark realities. I would love to hear, even based on your experience in the governor's team when you were raising your own children, and then thinking about kind of this specter of always evolving technology that parents are facing now. What gave you hope as a parent, and what do you think kind of is the hopeful reality for the future?
I mean, I think the kids themselves give me so much hope. Our youth are so bright and so, I don't know, kids today seem to be more mindful of things. And I don't know, maybe I'm just biased because I have kids, but I feel like kids today are awesome and they have so much potential. And young people I meet are asking the right questions. They're taking time to go deeper. I've had young men, who I've made presentations to, come back and say, I want to help with that. How can I get involved in teaching younger boys about this? Because this happened to me and I don't want it to happen to them. We have a new Girl Scout patch and curriculum that Not on Our Watch helped create with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that's going to empower Girl Scouts to learn about online safety and then go talk to younger girls about it. And that's just, it's going to take those kinds of peer-led initiatives, kids talking to kids. We have another project Protect Our Kids, Project Protect Our Children, which creates youth leaderboards in schools to take on this issue on their own and come up with their own projects and ideas on how to keep youth safe in their schools. That's what gives me hope. Not, just me talking about this, but the kids themselves doing something about it. And I see that happening more and more.
Yeah. And I guess kind of as a final question, throughout this conversation, just based on the things that we've talked about and based on that note of hope, what is something that you would say to kind of young people thinking about having kids, or maybe young parents who are experiencing parenthood with their first kid, and what would you most want them to know?
Take a deep breath. You don't have to read all the books that are out there right now. You don't have to, watch every show about it and listen to podcasts. We're naturally made to have children. This is something that's part of nature. It's part of our God-given gifts. And yes, it can seem like a scary world out there, but there's also a lot of light, and your children are going to be stronger than you think, and more resilient than you think.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for this conversation.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
these
you.
topics are tricky, but they're necessary, and I really appreciate your time and your expertise in this.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My name is Hannah Bruck. Let's bring family to the front.